Is the Sony 200-600mm lens a good choice for concert photography and not just wildlife photography? That is what we will discuss today. The Sony 200-600mm lens is a lens that I picked up strictly to get into wildlife photography, but I knew it was capable of more than that, and recently I got the opportunity to go and photograph a music festival in Victoria, BC, and I thought, well, let's bring this giant lens and see how it does. Because music festivals are not the same as being alone out in the woods looking for animals. It's totally different, but actually also kind of the same. So I wanted to share with you in this video how my experience went using the Sony 200-600mm lens as a concert photography lens, as an event photography lens at a music festival, and how that experience went for me. I want to show you some of the pictures that I got from it on my laptop here, and just give you the tips and tricks that worked for me, as well as an overall consensus on, is this a good lens for you to own if you want to do concert photography? If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Malcolm Owenflood. I try and talk about cameras, videography, and photography, and all the stuff I'm interested in that realm. And this 200-600mm lens has been probably the majority of my video topics because I love this lens. It's what got me into photography and videography, and it's just what keeps me going deeper and deeper. Getting a chance to try it out at a music festival, which is actually where my true background really begins. I was a touring musician for years in a band called Band of Rascals, and I got to go to a nice, great music festival called Tilt at Phillips Backyarder in Victoria, BC. Great lineup, shoot some killer pro bands with a nice crowd there, and try out concert photography kind of in a big way for the first time. I gotta say, it was so much fun. I got a really good welcome from all of the actual concert photographers that have been at, every festival I've played throughout my life. So it was really cool being, in the pit with them and trying it out from that side of the stage. I really enjoyed that. But I will say, I'm the only guy that brought something anywhere near this big. I think the only other super tele I saw was a 70-200. Yeah, I think so. I think 200mm is about as far as I saw anybody else break. So obviously I was taking a very different approach than the pros were. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm certainly not saying I'm right. I love the work of these other photographers, but I will say that I'm very happy with the result of what I got bringing this lens and shooting with it at this music festival. Real quick, I should note that all of these photos that you'll see later in this video were shot on the A7 IV, not my A7C. I actually bought it that weekend of this festival, like literally on my way to the festival. I bought a new camera and I was so glad I did because I love the A7 IV, which I'm shooting this with right now. So video coming on that camera, and just know that's what I used for this whole thing. The first thing that I thought we would talk about with the 200-600mm lens as a concert photography lens is it too long? As one of the other photographers said, you got to get those nose hairs. And this is Beasley, by the way. Or as my buddy Bud said, Malcolm and his bird bazooka, which is the best name ever for this lens, bird bazooka. But is it too long? I don't think so. I think actually it was awesome. I think having that reach was crazy cool. Having that compression was crazy cool. If we look at just a photo here, such as this one, I'm shooting between two people, and you can just see kind of like their blur framing our talent in the shot. And I think that's like a really cool thing. And I don't think I could have pulled this off with less like compressed and long photo length. So having the 600mm length let me go way back in the crowd. I could actually literally be on the other side of the sound tent and shoot through it and still get a shot I liked. That was really cool. So for my style, where I like having, something in my foreground and in my background, and the talent in the middle, that's kind of my ideal situation usually, is like this depth of field look. This is the perfect lens for that because I can be anywhere in the crowd. And as long as I can see the stage and what's going on, I can probably get a shot that I'm going to like. And when you're doing festival photography, if you have a media pass, which I was lucky enough to get for this, you get to do some of the photos from the pit, which is like the gap between the stage and the audience. And usually it's like 3 songs up there. And the 200-600mm is definitely on the long side for when you're that close to the talent. probably unnecessarily long. I was rolling it back to 200 and getting some shots there that I was happy with. So it's not like it was useless up there. It was actually super great still. But that said, a 100 to 400 or a 70 to 200 probably would excel in that scenario, I would say. But that's only 3 songs. My cat is scratching my back right now, but 1 second. Doing. All right. You only get 3 songs usually in the pit. So what about the rest of the set? You kind of need something with some reach to get some shots from when you're kicked out of the pit. And honestly, I preferred the shots I was getting outside of the pit because, like I said, I like shooting the kind of through things, like getting the energy of the crowd in front of me and having to shoot through that was the most enjoyable part of the entire experience for me. And in addition to shooting through the crowd, the other thing that I really liked about that 600mm length is that you can still get that eye contact and get even like that catchlight sometimes and just get that expression still from really far away. You don't even have to, like, they might not even know you're taking their photo. You're so far away, right? And like, look at that. It's like, it's spot on. I love this shot. You can see how happy she is. I've captured a moment. There's that like striking eye look. It just worked. 600mm. Let's see if I'm actually at 600. Just under 474 in this case. But that actually brings me to my next thought, and that is that I'm actually using the zoom range of this constantly. I was going from 200 to 600 to somewhere in the middle all the time. It was just, what is the crowd doing in front of me, and how can I either get through that or include it? And the zoom wheel was just the quickest way to kind of make my composition happen very quickly. So a very versatile range. 200 to 600 is obviously a very large range of zoom, and I was using all of it. And if I had one complaint about this lens, it is that it is definitely heavy. My back was sore, my biceps were burning, but you do get used to it. And every time I go shooting, I feel like it gets a little bit easier. And honestly, this is the lens I shoot the most with. So it kind of just feels normal now. 3 days of back-to-back music festivals. Yeah, that was tiresome, not gonna lie. But I got through it. You definitely, Peak Design slide strap, link in the description as usual, because this thing is a lifesaver. I couldn't have done it without that. Absolutely necessary with this lens, in my opinion. If you're shooting handheld. And that is the thing, you've got to shoot handheld at a music festival, essentially. You can't really expect the crowd or festival organizers, for that matter, to tolerate you cruising around with a tripod. You probably pull off a monopod, but again, it depends how lively the crowd is, how busy it is. Can you kind of get around quickly? Because you got to kind of find your spots, jump around, get your angles, and maneuver through the crowd and snake your way through. It's hard enough doing it with this lens, honestly. It's big, and you want to keep it safe. With an extra stick attached to it, I don't think that's really an option, honestly. Which does bring me to my next topic, and that is crowd control. How does the crowd react to a lens this big? Because you don't want to take away from other people's experience, and you also don't want to maybe get too much attention either. And I gotta hand it to this festival. It was such a happy place. The audience was in a really good mood. Everybody was super helpful. It's not kind of too helpful. You know, sometimes I try and like shoot through a pair of people standing watching, and they would notice me and then graciously get out of the way, but I actually wanted them there. It's hard to be discreet with this lens, and I don't think camo is going to do it at a music festival. It would probably just scare people more, honestly. So you just got to hope that they're kind of caught up in the music. If it was a really rowdy show, I happen to be a bit of a metalhead, and if I was at a Slipknot show, I would be more careful where I chose to stand with this lens. Can't see a lot. You got this big thing. You don't want it to get hit or it to hit other people. It's definitely something to think about with a lens of this size and this expensive. But also, it's a bit of a target, I guess. And I didn't experience this at all, but it's just a thought that came to mind that if there were some drunk assholes, this would probably paint a little bit of a target on you. So just keep your head on a swivel. One more thought on that. In addition to being pretty noticeable in the crowd from the audience members, you're also really noticeable to the event security. And no saying this is just a little hobby lens like you're bringing in to snap memories. They know that this is a professional unit and you better have a media pass or they're not going to let you bring it in or you're going to get kicked out of there. So just a quick note on that because I did misplace my media pass like a total rookie, and I sorted it out though. It helps to know a guy. And I did mention before that I was shooting all of this with my A7 IV, which I am filming this with. But before that, I had an A7C, and I did bring that as well. And that was totally necessary because, well, this is a huge zoom range. 200 to 600 millimeters is great. It certainly won't give you any wide shots. And you might want something, you know? So I found myself putting this down, having to pack it away into my backpack, and then pulling out my Sony A7C and grabbing some shots with my like 16 to 28 or 28 to 75, just getting those shots as well. And if I watch the other like photographers in the pit there, the pros, they're all rocking 2 camera bodies on a harness, a dual harness, and they're just one lens to the other. And that's going to be a hard thing to do with something this big, you know, a harness system. But I think working out some kind of solution just to have that smaller camera body or smaller lens on a body available if you want to do a really good job at a music festival, I think that's pretty crucial. And it's definitely something I'm going to try and sort out before I go and do another one. Okay, so as promised, let's look at some shots that I got from it. This is literally just from one day. I haven't edited all the other days. It's not all the photos that I took, of course, but it's just some highlights that I thought were kind of cool. And I think that are unique to having a 600mm lens. So let's look at those. This was kind of a cool shot, I thought, because Philip's backyard is where the festival was happening. It's the brewery that hosts the festival, I guess. And I thought it would be a nice thing to get a shot that kind of showed a performer, but gave some marketing to the gracious hosts of this festival. I can really get creative on what the subject is. And you can see it compresses very nicely. If we double check, that's at 200mm, by the way. So that was probably when I was in the pit, actually, judging by how close she is. I think I showed you this one already, but kind of very framed by audience members, which helps capture the energy. And this is actually really important to talk about as well, is light and depth with this lens. Because the aperture on this isn't very fast. If you think of like, you know, what most people think of when they think apertures, they think of like a 1.4 or 1.8, even up to a 2.8. But this, it's a lot higher than that, right? This is 5.6 to 6.3, which, you know, makes some people quiver in their boots that they could never get a good looking shot with that. But that is not the case. I promise you. The longer the focal length, the more that seems to be irrelevant. You're going to get a nice bokeh out of this lens, a nice depth of field in the foreground and the background. The only trouble you're going to have won't be the depth of field, it will be fighting for light. And in this shot, you can see it is clearly nice daylight. The sun was just getting golden around this set, and that was really working well for what was going on here. But you're going to see some photos later that were taken as it got dark, and it was much noisier, more of a struggle, honestly, because this lens just isn't that fast comparatively for nighttime photography. That's where you're going to find the hardest struggle with a 200 to 600mm lens. That's when you're probably going to have to go faster and get a shorter lens that can give you the speed you need for low light performance. All right, this is the same band, JJ Wild, by the way, great rock band. They were so good. Yeah, just dig this, punching in close. Just you get an impression of their face. It's kind of a freeze action look. I found myself really cranking the shutter. I bet if we look at this is at 600mm and I am at 1/8000 on my shutter speed, which is really, really fast, of course, but it's like just so sharp. And again, you're in like a moving crowd. Being stable is just tricky. And I don't think I stayed up there most of the time, but I was kind of experimenting. It paid off on this shot, I think. So here is actually a photo that was getting a lot darker, and it totally still worked. As you can see, we still had light getting onto his face. He kind of stepped onto that perfect part of the stage that was working for me. But like, we get eyes, and this is, you know, had to be denoised. So it's not a lot of detail when you zoom in there, but in its full form, I'm quite happy with it. I think it makes the cut. And again, this one was a nighttime shot. Because it was so noisy, I kind of embraced it, went with a black and white, kind of grittier vibe. I think it worked. And I really like this light in his eye here. And I just don't think you'd be able to see that without a nice punch-in lens. Getting really tight on this one, getting that like expression. Again, this one, probably my favorite just because it captures a moment. It looks like eye contact. I highly doubt she was looking at the camera, but it's just a great shot. You can see how happy she is up there. And the colors on this lens are just awesome, I think. Okay, I lied. This might be my favorite photo. So much energy going on. We got crazy cool light coming across her hair here. It's just like performing so hard. It's got energy. I experimented a lot with like tilting my angles and not just kind of keeping my horizon level, and I think it gave more energy to the look a lot of the time. We even got like a kind of a rim light on her hair. It's great. Everything worked out in that shot. She filled the frame quite perfectly. This is something that nobody's told me before, but these lenses, super telephoto lenses, are great because you throw this thing at 600 millimeters and get a reflection, and you can actually see what's in the reflection really well. Like, how cool is that? It's great. I wish it was just filled with people's faces, honestly. That would be the best, but funny, great shot. Anyways, another cool one here. Again, look at the eyes. It's just like a great image. We got everything we need there. And on the topic of reflections, I actually wanted to show you one more. I haven't edited this one. I just picked it, but I love this. You can see the crowd in those glasses. It's going to be a fun one to edit, I think. Yeah, looks good. So yes, I think this lens is killer. That's just, you know, a couple highlights from one day, 2 more days, and a whole lot more keepers than that. But it gives you an idea of what you're going to get out of this lens, what kind of styles you can chase. Again, I recommend jumping into the crowd, get into the energy of it, and it's more fun that way. You get to hear the music in a better way. It sounds better a little bit back. You're in the crowd, experiencing it with the people, and you're kind of where the performers are going to be directing their energy anyways, in my opinion. I didn't get to go behind the stage and get any of those shots, which are always really cool because you can see the performer and the audience from a different perspective. But I imagine that would also work with this lens, depending on the stage size. Worth a shot. If you've used it in concert photography, I'd love to know what you think. The only thing I can really say is that I don't think it would be a great nighttime photography or probably indoor concert photography lens, but for outside festivals, totally happy. It's going to come with me every time, I think. I loved it. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you enjoy this content. I've got another video coming up where I'm going to be talking about my new A7 IV, and then also a comparison video with the A7 IV and my A7C. So people that might be curious on if it's worth upgrading from the C or don't know which one to get, that video is going to be very helpful for you. It's going to be the video that I wish I had found, honestly. But I'm happy. Got my wildlife lens, and I can also shoot musicians with it. What could be better? Okay, see you in the next one.